who has been following the aircraft all day. That is the American and United Airlines planes involved in these incidents. Lynn?
As you well know, the only video that we've seen of an actual crash was of that second flight. That was the United flight that crashed into the second World Trade Tower. What we're going to show you now is some very crude animation of the first flight. That was American Airlines 11. That's the flight from Boston to Los Angeles that went into the first World Trade Tower. What this is animation based on the track of the plane, data coming from the FAA. You're going to hear Walter Cross, the programmer, describing it.
The flight took an immediate hard left turn due south. The speed initially decreased by over 100 miles an hour and then increased to over 500. And then as it approached the New York area, it slowed to all the way down to about 300 knots. So, and then tragically it impacted in the World Trade Center. American 11 was indeed the first flight. We have confirmed that of the two.
And that, again, that was the voice of Walter Cross, the programmer who put that animation together. What that shows you is this flight on its way to Los Angeles headed due west and then made that very sharp turn. Mr. Cross also told us that there was an indication of some air violence right before that left-hand turn, violent changes in airspeed as the plane went off track to head into the World Trade Towers. On that flight, 92 people, not counting the hijacker. And Peter, I've done some very quick calculations. Of course, all of the planes involved in today's incidents were headed to California. 3 of them to Los Angeles, 1 to San Francisco, 2 had left Boston, 1 from Dulles, 1 from Newark Airport. Total number of passengers and crew, 266 people, not, of course, counting the hijackers. Peter?
Thanks very much, Lynn. And the issue of taking off from Boston and Dulles and all headed for California, John Miller raised the issue before of whether or not, well, lots of reasons, and again we'd be speculating, but he makes the point that aircraft taking off from Boston and Dulles outside Washington to go to California would have full loads of fuel on them, thereby creating a far greater explosive potential without having had to have explosives on board and getting them past U.S. security either at Dulles Airport or at Boston. 266 people on the aircraft alone today who have died in this attack on the United States and on the American people. Now, in our control room, somebody says there is let me go first to Bill Blakemore and then perhaps to Joe Torres of WABC, our affiliate in New York. Bill Blakemore, you there? And I gather you saw number 7 come down.
Yes, I did, Peter. I'm standing right on the West Side Highway. The skyline of the financial district has changed again. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to some people. I was facing north. I saw shock in their face, heard screams, spun around, and then we just watched the building fall in on itself. I believe we have a little bit of tape here. That's, Peter, it was an astonishing thing because the civilians who were standing around here were all amazed, but things have become so bizarre down here that the hundreds of firemen who were standing around looked at it, felt a bit shocked, but then just said, well, we're going to have even more work to do. Associate producer Lucy Kerrigan had been over near that building just a little bit earlier, and the policeman had told her that they feared the building was going to come down, that they were evacuating people from around it. So that's one little bit of good news, is that there may have been fewer casualties from this latest collapse than there otherwise might have been because they knew of the potential. But it's now still a very hot day here. The search and rescue operation is mounting even larger. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks backed up on the West Side Highway, police trucks. There are what look like hundreds of volunteers who have showed up, who have been marshaled by the Red Cross, all with masks to avoid breathing in dust, but nobody can go in yet. We're still looking at buildings that are on fire down in the center of the financial district, and it's clearly a great deal of devastation. It's not too strong a word at all. It's going to take a while even to assess how bad it is.
Bill, do you have any idea whether or not other buildings in the immediate area are vulnerable at the moment, whether there's concern about any other building as there was about this additional one after the towers?
Well, from the angle I'm looking at, we can see one other building still on fire, and it seems to be on fire through the length of it. I would estimate that's like a 30 or 40 story building. The problem for any one of us, of course, is that because of the other buildings down here still standing, which are so tall, you can't get a very clean view of the whole thing from the ground. But there's at least one, and it's clearly going to go on into the night. There's a lot of black smoke pouring out of that building now.
Thank you, Bill. We just stay with this photograph for this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wire it very carefully for days, and it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down inside. In the case of the north and south towers there of the World Trade Center, come down within a couple of hours as a result of the structural damage, weakening that was done when these aircraft hit them. And now number 7, the World Trade Center, which is 47 stories tall. We're talking with the World Trade Center north and south 110 stories tall. An eerie experience to be in them at the best of times. They sway in the wind, and people have long had experiences with them. But those, and as Bill Blakemore said just a moment ago, the landscape of New York City has changed one again. And in this instance, it's not New York City, it's not New Yorkers' cities, it's everybody in the country's city at this moment, because this was an attack on the United States, no question about it. Everybody said it all day, a declaration of war, an act of war against the United States. We've had any number of politicians and commentators, us included, who were reminded that the last time there was an attack like this on the United States was Pearl Harbor, which finally induced the United States to get fully involved in World War II. And we're going to go on all day, and we'll continue throughout the night trying to get some grasp of this. What do we know at the moment? The president is on his way back to Washington, and we're not certain whether he's going to be helicoptered in from Andrews Air Force Base, which is tradition, but the security apparatus is concerned, and so he may come in a motorcade. I can't remember the last time a president went or came from Andrews Air Force Base in a motorcade. Maybe the last time was Bill Clinton. No, I don't even think Bill Clinton at the end of his inauguration went out. But there's another example. And the president wants to speak to the nation. And Linda Douglas reports from Capitol Hill that the leadership in Congress tonight wants to have. You have who on the telephone? I didn't know that. I did not know that. I apologize. Thank you. First time I've heard about it. Judge Webster?
Peter.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were on the phone.
No, it's been very interesting, and I'm glad to listen.
Thank you, sir. This is Judge William Webster, the former director of the FBI, on the phone, one of the and the CIA as well, as my friend John Miller points out. Judge Webster, maybe you could help us understand many things, but at the outset, when this happened today, does this overwhelm the FBI and drive the CIA into some kind of turmoil at the same time?
When it happened today, is that your question?
Yes, sir.
It seemed to me that they responded quickly. The FBI's emergency operations centers were in place. CIA, of course, is going back to its intelligence and see what they had, what they didn't have. I think what you usually find in a situation like that is grim determination to do a good job. I don't think it's any kind of frustration or frenzy.
And as you have watched these events unfold today, and perhaps even talked to your colleagues, your former colleagues in the FBI and the CIA, what's your appreciation of this as a whole event?
Well, it's an extraordinary event, and it brings home what we've been saying about the change of terrorism in the last 20 years, as it moves from fewer numbers, trying to make one of the things that we're trying to say, should we tighten up? It's not clear to me that we don't know enough yet to draw any firm conclusions about whether or not people were able to walk on board those airplanes with weapons that pass through the screening devices. We just don't know yet, and we shouldn't draw conclusions about that. But I think we have to be sure that we have done everything we can to know in advance. Getting there before the bomb goes off is the ultimate objective. And it requires a lot of cooperation now internationally. We have to share information with our friends around the world about movements of people who are believed to be bent on violence. It's a very tough assignment, and it's one in which we can see now we're going to have tighten our our belts, because I think, again, when the reports of the casualties is finally released, it's going to be a lot more than anybody expected, and probably will be more, or at least approximate the size. We haven't had anything like it since Pearl Harbor.
Judge Webster, I don't mean to make you the target of criticism today. It's not my intention at all. But as I listen to you talk about we got to tighten our belt and our defenses, it's what we hear after almost every incident of terrorism. And I wonder what you think, as you've listened and watched today, what you think more could be done that the United States hasn't been doing up until now that is humanly possible in a free society. FBI, you want to make it tougher for Americans to move about because it's easier for you to do your job under those circumstances. What's your message to the American people today about retaining their freedoms in the face of this kind of enemy?
I think the message is that we can't have a pendulum swinging back and forth from
open up and respond to the situation, that tomorrow may be the only day on which the various exchanges are closed. That remains to be seen, and there will be a decision tomorrow as to whether or not the New York Stock Exchange will remain closed beyond Wednesday. Latin American markets, for instance, will decide tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time whether or not to open as scheduled. There will be regular trading in Tokyo tonight. So financial regulators, policymakers will be deciding over the next several hours whether to allow the markets to respond to this catastrophe and let them take their course. The biggest question right now is how this event is going to affect consumer psychology in this country, and will this terrorist attack create a level of uncertainty and possibly even panic among consumers that they really curtail their spending, which could throw the U.S. economy into an official recession. That's the worry among economists this evening.
All right, CNBC's Ron Insana. Ron, thank you very much. Katie?
Skip Brandon is the former FBI counterterrorism chief. He
evacuated as a precaution. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people are feared hurt or killed in what is clearly the worst ever terrorist attack on the United States. Ben Wiedemann, CNN.
More perspective now. We turn to Brian Jenkins, who is a counterterrorism expert. He joins us from Los Angeles this afternoon. Sir, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit. I mean, it cannot escape our attention that the targets struck were in the very seats of U.S. wealth, of U.S.
Why they want dogs?
They want bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, the kind of dogs that can climb up in the rubble with them and catch the scent of people that they can dig for in such a big pile of rubble.
It is a strange name for a specialty, but there are indeed things called cadaver dogs. Anybody who called it the Condit investigation know that they were used, and et cetera. Go on,
right.
Please.
100 doctors, 100 nurses are standing by the main police facility that is now the command post for the NYPD, not police headquarters, but an off-site location further up into Midtown, has them standing by waiting for somewhere to send them. And essentially, this long operation, which will be the longest night for New York's rescue workers, has just begun.
And thank you, John. And Cynthia McFadden, I believe, is now at Chelsea Piers, a large sports entertainment complex on the west side of Manhattan, or at least close to it, which Cynthia is...
It's a little different than just watching something happening somewhere else. Now we're the victims.
Dr. Bentovegna, Lisa Silvani just touched on this with school kids. Discussing this with your children, a lot of them have been watching this on TV too. Your advice in explaining this to a child?
I think you have to tailor the explanation to the age of the child. It's important to let them know, depending upon their age, as much as they can handle of what's going on. You can't hide this from them. And I think letting them know the truth based upon their age and what they can understand is the best thing to do for them. It gives them a sense of understanding. It empowers them in the world rather than making them helpless victims as a consequence of what's taken place.
Okay.
I have one more question, if I could.
Let me just go a little farther with that. You say 250 ambulances standing around waiting to pull people out. You'd be talking about pulling people out of the rubble at this point. The mayor reminded people across the country there are 170 hospitals in New York City, and aside from St. Vincent's, the principal nearest hospital, which lost, among other things, its emergency power, I think, and lost its gas operating facility at the time, wasn't it, John?
That was Beekman Downtown, or New York Infirmary, that lost its steam power. St. Vincent's then actually had to bear the brunt of this.
And so people have gone directly to hospital. I don't quite understand, Cynthia, the who's going to come to Chelsea Piers until they begin to rescue people, hopefully, from the rubble itself.
Peter, the the initial thought, and of course, as you know, we've been to Bellevue today, a couple of other places. There have been hundreds of people at area hospitals, as you note. But they don't believe that anywhere near the full weight of this has yet been uncovered, that there are hundreds and thousands of people who have been injured in this blast, and that's the people that they expect to bring here.
Okay.
St. Vincent's is saturated at this point. They're intending, now whether this happens, but the emergency medical services that's running this medical operation intends to bring no more patients directly to hospitals. They will all be brought here first for medical attention and for triage out to other hospitals.
What they've been talking about is the large number of walking wounded.
Yes.
Literally.
That fire that was blazing on the horizon, it was a faint yellow. It's now a bright orange blazing. Several other detonations going off around the city, multiple areas. Rockets appear to be taking off from one end of the airport. I can see that's perhaps located about 8 or 9 miles away from where we stand, Joey.
To ask you to please keep your line up to us. We're having difficulty reaching you on another line, but please keep your line up. We can see the pictures coming to us by the video phone. Again, this is very advanced technology that CNN is using, but you will see some of the digital effect. It is not quite as clear as your average television signal, and so to our viewers, we apologize for that. But this is certainly the only video that you're going to get from Kabul, Afghanistan at this point, and you're watching it on CNN. Again, we are hearing from our correspondent, Nick Robertson, who's on the scene in Kabul with his team there, and he has reported the sounds of tracer fire. He has reported the fire burning there in Kabul, the seat of Afghanistan's power, the seat of its Taliban government. Again, we are watching their picture coming to us on the video phone, and it is very hard, of course, to see exactly what you're looking at, but you are looking at Kabul. Again, you see some tracer fire there coming across the scene. Nick Robertson, can you hear us?
We're being told, Joey, I can hear you if you can hear me. Certainly, big detonation there, missiles flying across the city. We're being told from sources in Kandahar, that's the spiritual capital of Afghanistan, 300 miles south of here, that there is no rocket activity like this south of here in Kandahar. Certainly in Kabul, very, very active at this stage. Multiple detonations. It is nighttime here. It is dark. It is difficult to get an accurate fix on exactly what we're seeing and exactly what we're hearing. Certainly the sound, what appears to be the sound of large missiles incoming and landing in the city. Certainly a big fire on the horizon of the city at the moment, and certainly anti-aircraft fire coming up from the city, and rockets being launched and flying across the horizon of the city. Rockets perhaps going at the speed of several hundred miles an hour, the sort of speed that one might expect to see cruise missiles traveling across the horizon at, burning with a white glow coming from their tails rather than a yellow glow. The fire on the horizon that we can see from here burning furiously now. Perhaps it would be accurate at this stage to suspect that that was a fuel dump that's been hit by the way that it's burning, flames leaping, and that fuel dump must...
Who may be talking on the telephone from Afghanistan and likely in Arabic.
To the city, that fuel dump, perhaps the only big fire we can see at this time. From our vantage point here at the Kabul Intercontinental Hotel that overlooks the whole of the city of Kabul, that is in a basin surrounded by mountains, the whole city is laid out in front of us. The gunfire that was coming up from the city seems to have subsided for now. We're not hearing.
Apparently, Doug, we're going to stay with Peter Jennings for a little bit at this point and see if we can find out more about the retaliation. As we started to say, Osama bin Laden, of course, a name linked unofficially to all of this, a lot of speculation about it, and with Afghanistan's perhaps being the place where he's being harbored right now, some good indications that may be the point of retaliation.
Right. We'll turn it back to the folks at ABC News, and we'll bring you the local reaction to these attacks coming up in a few minutes.
In the Muslim community, the Taliban are troubled by any standard. Here is the mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani.
And evacuation efforts can go on unhindered. 14th Street North in Manhattan will be open, but it's going to be very crowded, and it's going to be a complex and difficult day. So if tomorrow is the day you can take off, it probably would be a good thing to stay home and treat it as you would a day in which we had some form of a snowstorm or really difficult getting into Manhattan. And I know when we say that, we have fewer people in the city, and that will help. But if you have to come to work tomorrow, 14th Street North, the city will be open to civilian traffic. We now are up to over 600 people that we know about that we've taken to area hospitals, 2,000 people to Liberty State Park. The morgue is operating.
All right, at this point, when we went back to ABC, they had gone to the mayor of New York City, Rudolph Giuliani, talking about what's going on. But CNN is still carrying, as we see this breaking news now, as we understand it, the apparent retaliation now of the United States against Afghanistan. And we now join CNN Live briefly to see what we can find out.
Particularly in the direction of the Kabul airport, which is about 5 to 8 miles from where we are. Detonations coming from there. I remember standing on this balcony about 4 years ago watching fighter jets bomb that airport as part of Afghanistan's ongoing civil war. The flash at the airport to us hearing the detonation at the hotel is about the same duration, so I am using that as an estimate to gauge that those missiles again are falling in the area of the airport. First we're seeing the flash, and then we hear the detonation some several seconds afterwards, and they appear to be coming from that airport area, in some cases several miles away from us. There is still a lot of flashing we can see in the air reflected off clouds. That could be thunder and lightning. However, there's a possibility that those reflections are missiles landing elsewhere. The flashes as they explode and reflecting off the clouds. But it's not a good indication. We certainly don't hear any detonations coming from that particular direction at this time. The anti-aircraft fire that we were seeing a little while ago is not coming up from the city. The city, apart from the detonations we were hearing a few minutes ago, appears very, very calm. The visibility here is excellent. We can see all the way across the city. It lies on a plain that's surrounded by the mountains here in Kabul. We have telling journalists and CNN that he didn't believe that Afghanistan would be attacked. He said if Afghanistan was attacked, then they would call it, the Taliban would call it an act of state-sponsored terrorism, Joey.
All right, that is CNN's Nick Robertson. Again, please keep the line open to us. Nick Robertson there in Kabul, Afghanistan. For our viewers who are watching this with us on the air, again, we're getting this from video phone technology. You're seeing this exclusively on CNN. It is a very new technology, and so you could tell from the audio line it is not as clear as our typical TV feed, and the visuals obviously are not as clear, but you are looking at the city of Kabul in Afghanistan. This is the seat of the Taliban government. They're not its spiritual center, but its government center in any case. You are seeing in just about the last 10 minutes, we have been hearing these reports from CNN correspondent Nick Robertson on the ground in Kabul.
All right, we are back again. CNN continuing coverage, and we will rejoin that or ABC should the developments warrant that, as we're monitoring now the apparent retaliation for the plane collisions today that leveled the World Trade Center.
We're keeping an eye on things, worldwide events, and also keeping an eye on things our local companies. They're looking for their employees in New York City who are yet unaccounted for. Some companies have offices in the World Trade Center or had employees headed to Manhattan for meetings today. News Source 13's Krista Miranda has been checking with some local companies and joins us now with more on their situations. Kristen?
Ginny, here's what we know so far about just a handful of companies. Xerox has an undetermined number of employees who were scheduled to be in the World Trade Center today. Some of those employees are unaccounted for at this time. Local management has been trying throughout the day to contact them by phone. Now, Xerox was closed today. It will reopen tomorrow. For Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, the company occupied 50 floors in the World Trade Center. Information from the downtown Rochester branch is that all their employees have been accounted for. We're still waiting for word on some employees from other branches. The advertising firm Saatchi & Saatchi is closed today. A message on the company voicemail indicates employees were sent home to be with their families. The downtown offices of law firm Harris Beach closed at noon today. The company had an office on the 85th floor of tower number 2 of of the World Trade Center. That was the second tower hit by a plane today. 113 people worked there, many of whom are still missing. There were 3 people from the Rochester office scheduled to be at the World Trade Center for a meeting this morning. They had a very close call.
Very fortunate. They were just had arrived at the World Trade Center when on their way getting out of a cab when they heard the airplane noise and then what sounded like a sonic boom and then a piece of debris the size of a dump truck a block away. And they stayed in the cab and went out and rented a car and are on their way back to Rochester safe.
One problem all of these companies are running into is an inability to get through by phone, whether it's a landline or a cell phone. That's really slowing down the process of making sure their employees are all right, but they've all been working throughout the day to confirm who is safe and who may not be, and they'll continue to work through the evening, and we'll let you know later on in the evening as these companies learn more about where their employees are and how they're doing.
Yeah, phone lines are just overloaded. In fact, I read something on the wires earlier that said if you can stay off the phones, please do it, because we have emergency situations we're trying to get information on. Thank you, Chris. And of course, that situation we will watch closely, hoping to hear from local companies.
And cellular phone communication in New York, because so many of the cellular phone towers on top of the World Trade Center and some local broadcasters as well, all of that communication wiped out.
Yeah.
Talking about businesses here in Rochester were closed today as well. News Source 13's Patrice Walsh joining us now downtown, where she has been all day today, gauging the emotions of people as they react to what has taken place.
And Don, we just got some late-breaking news from City Hall. They tell us that City Hall will again be open for business tomorrow, but the underground parking garages will remain closed. You'll recall they also were closed today, so you'll have to find some other places to park. That is the latest news from City Hall. No word yet on schools. Of course, if we get that, we will pass it along. This has been a day of both fear and sadness for people in Rochester, concerned not only for their own safety, but for their relatives who are in New York City.
They left the decision up to us. And because my mother-in-law's in New York City, I just feel the best place for me to be is with my kids.
Is she okay? Have you heard?
She's a wreck because she lives close.
It's been one sad story after another, so it's pretty hard to get some work accomplished today, so we pretty much call it quits for the day.
Places like underground garages, areas that we have very strong security concerns, we are taking steps to allay that concern. What we hope to do right now is to, first of all, just stabilize people's fears, look at potential issues that could be problems, and take precautions.
Now, Rochester police put more officers on the street today. You see them guarding buildings like the Federal Building and County Office Building, which of course were closed today. We mentioned City Hall remained open, as did city schools, but of course security was increased. We saw that for ourselves firsthand. Police responded to calls of possible threats in full force. This incident involved the report of a man with a gun on Main Street and St. Paul Street. Police say they have to take every call more seriously. They say they cannot say that something like that could not happen here. They have to take everything seriously, but they also pointed out to us there have been no threats, so they have received no threats like this, but you saw them responding to that call, probably 10 squad cars responding, Don. They have to do that, of course, when things are like this. And we talked to the officer behind us. It's going to be a long night for him, at least till 3 in the morning. So they are going to continue to keep watch over these buildings downtown.
The one concern, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but when we say underground garages, what about like ramp garages? The South Avenue ramp, the one over by Sibley's, are ramps considered, because part of them may be underground, to be part of that?
I'm not certain about that, Don. I know the Civic Center garage and the one here by City Hall are closed. You can tell by the officers, if there's officers standing outside keeping you out, obviously they're going to be closed, but many of them are affected, so people should make other plans for tomorrow anyway.
News Source 13's Patrice Walsh reporting live at the Federal Building. Thank you.
One of the places where precautions are being taken is the city's reservoir out in Rush. Sheriff's deputies are guarding it. The scene, the same at other local water supply sources, both in Monroe County and for city water. Presumably, of course, this to guard against any kind of terrorist act or perhaps a copycat attack as well, aimed at the water we drink. So a lot of extra precautions, pretty much a matter of routine whenever there's a national emergency like this. a lot of local pieces falling into place.
Never seen a day like this before.
No, not in a long time.
For the first time in the history of U.S. aviation, commercial flights were completely suspended. So at the Rochester airport today, there was a lot of anger, frustration, and even some relief. Passengers headed for New York were turned around. Others never got off the ground. As News Source 13's Jane Flash tells us, the airport remains closed until further notice.
20 flights had already left Rochester bound for New York City when everything came to a standstill. People here were brought together by the horror of what they were seeing.
It's scary. It scares me to death.
No, I'm not frightened. I'm angry. I'm really angry because people in an airplane are totally helpless.
Rochester passengers on this American flight were turned back in the air after circling LaGuardia Airport.
Apparently there has been hijacking, and they believe a 767 was flown into the World Trade Center. So everybody on the plane just gasped and tried to catch their breath. They said, we're going to turn the plane around and go back to Rochester.
The airport terminal is now closed. For the first time anyone can remember, the Greater Rochester International Airport locked its doors. Armed deputies stood guard while others patrolled the tarmac. The eerie quiet is part of Monroe County's emergency plan, which is now underway.
We will have a higher level of security tonight for the terminal and for the ramp, and obviously for the aircraft that are here until further notice.
Planes will remain grounded until at least noon tomorrow. Jane Flash, News Source 13.
If you'd like to check on family in New York City, we have 3 phone numbers for you set up by the American Red Cross. They are on your screen. You may want to jot them down. The first one, 241-4207. The second one, 241-4208. And the last one is 241-4209. The airlines have some numbers set up too, and I'm sure you can get that by calling the main lines at United and American for information.
And if you have a computer, check your website as well. Area hospitals and the American Red Cross have been responding to calls for help all day. News Source 13 medical reporter Liz Bonus spent this day with healthcare providers, disaster volunteers in our community, and joins us now with more on what this day was like for you.
Just an amazing response from all of them. Hospitals have been put on alert should those wounded in New York City need to be brought here for care. That means extra medical staff has been put on standby. Hospital patients have been discharged if appropriate to free up beds, and some non-urgent surgeries have been canceled or postponed. The one thing hospitals all across our state will need more of: blood and blood donations. Our community has responded to that call. People lined up around the block at Prince Street today. They were, many said they just came sort of out of a feeling of helplessness as they watched and waited as this tragedy began to unfold.
They have to do something, and a lot of people in Rochester came out. I think it's a pretty active community.
The important message is that the Red Cross will need your blood in the days to come, not just today. News Source 13 has set up an emergency blood drive this Friday at the Dome in Henrietta with the American Red Cross. That'll run from 10 to 6. If you can donate, you're asked to stop by at any time. The Red Cross has already sent emergency response teams to New York City. We expect to hear more from them in the days to come. They were there today in full force, just wanting to go out. They weren't letting first-time volunteers go, which was interesting. They wanted some people with experience. They don't know what they're going to encounter because one of their main call centers was in the World Trade Center, and they can't communicate to find out how bad it is.
And we're taking one of the lead roles, I understand, in trying to help out down to the local Red Cross.
Well, ours is. We've got a wonderful team that has responded before, not just physical care, but mental health. They say the people who are seeing this are just, you know, it's a tragedy we don't know, and they're trying to respond on all fronts.
All right, thank you, Liz.
Well, we saw it at the Red Cross today. It's times like these that often bring out the best in people. Shortly after the attacks, churches opened up their doors. Many of them are holding vigils and have held them today. News Source 13's Brian Washington is live on Exchange Boulevard with more on that story. Brian?
Yeah, Jenny, as you mentioned, in times like this, people often turn to prayer and their faith. Well, the service here has started, and people are starting to arrive here. Now, members here at the Church of Love Faith Center say they have been in what they call a season of prayer for the past month and a half. They've been meeting 3 nights a week, every week for the last month and a half to pray about issues and concerns that they have in their lives. Well, considering what happened today in New York City and Washington, D.C., those who show up here tonight will have a lot to pray about.
We realize that, especially in a time like we're dealing with today,
there's nothing that we can do to change things. The only one who has the power to change things is God. And I believe that prayer is really the only thing that's going to see us through this. We can, you know, fret, we can tense up, we can get emotional, we can get, you know, frantic about it all, but that's not going to make a difference. We need to turn to God.
Now, this is just one of several churches holding this type of service around the area. Now, no doubt what they are doing here tonight, many of our viewers will be doing in their homes, and that is praying.
All right, News Source 13's Brian Washington. There are a number of vigils, and you can, I think, turn to our website, iknowrochester.com, for more information on various churches holding vigils throughout the area.
A list of churches, and a lot of them will be gathering tonight. We're going to take just a short break from all of this. We will get back to not only some local reaction to what happened in New York City and the nation's capital today, but also the network coverage. But we do want to check on our weather. Our chief meteorologist, Glenn Johnson, is here to tell us what we can expect over the next day or so.
Done. We were lucky in our business because we had something to do, and we were able to focus on a task as opposed to sit home and just feel that helplessness that, that Liz was talking about. And one of the things we do in the newsroom, in between all the busy things we have to do, is kind of share our own thoughts with each other, and that's what people are doing who are watching right now. And the first thing I thought about today was to think a little bit about what's become known as the greatest generation, the men and women who fought World War II or survived it on the many home fronts. Not since the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 have Americans dealt with anything like this. 2,400 Americans died in that attack, and it is quite possible, it is probable, that many more died in this attack on our country today. But back then, one difference that several people pointed out today, Americans could identify the enemies. And at this point today, we do not know who did this to us, and we can only guess as to why. And maybe that makes it especially hard today. And when was the last time we saw this happening? We caught it downtown today at State and Main. Sales of an extra edition of the local paper with the headlines, Chaos and U.S. Under Attack. So not so much reporting on my part, but kind of sharing the thoughts that I had, that I think a lot of viewers share. And you look back at that greatest generation, you think, think of the courage they had and the resolve they had, and you hope they passed it on to us.
There was a quote today from a woman about Pearl Harbor in the paper on this extra edition. What did she say? Laura Marr of Brighton says, it's the Pearl Harbor of the new millennium. A lot of people were saying
I define these days sometimes by the conversation with my best friend who's now out in California, and we always talk. And I can remember when John F. Kennedy was killed, when Bobby Kennedy was killed, the Challenger disaster, events like that. And his was one of the first calls this morning, and it was 3 hours earlier out there. But I kind of measure those days. The conversations we have pinpointed these events in time, and sadly, tragic events.
Okay. They do define us, don't they, in a lot of ways. Well, you can stay tuned to ABC News and News Source 13 for continuing coverage. ABC News will be on the air for at least another 24 hours till tomorrow night. You can also log on to our website, iknowrochester.com, for information on closings, Red Cross information, and much more.
And finally, a bright spot hard to find on a tragic day like today. Perhaps, though, it lies in our freedom to express the sense of law.
Phone calls, what should I do? What should I do? But of course, there was nothing she could do. Peter?
Thank you, Charlie Gibson. Barbara Olson giving us inadvertently, or maybe not inadvertently, giving us a new piece of information, John Miller, because of all the things that you try to smuggle into an aircraft, if her eyewitness report is correct, that the hijackers on that particular plane were cutting box cutters, are easier to smuggle than a lot of other things.
Well, yes, and especially because there are box cutters that are...
take them apart and put them back together again.
Right. That come in plastic sheets as opposed to metal. The blade itself is a razor blade, so even in a metal scan looking for guns or knives, it's not going to show up as a high-profile item, especially if you put it in a carry-on bag that's very busy with other items.
It is, as you were talking, I just keep thinking, when we'll ever learn about this? We will learn perhaps someday what actually happened in those cockpits if the cockpit tapes survive these horrendous incidents. But this is not like the black boxes necessarily, which keep automatic records of the plane's systems. The cockpit tape is more vulnerable.
The cockpit, the in-flight recorder will be invaluable here. I think the best shot, obviously, is the one that went down in Pennsylvania, because they can search for that within the wreckage of an airplane. It is an uphill struggle.
This is an ABC News special report.
Hello again, everybody, and for those of you joining us now who I cannot imagine under any circumstances expected to see a normal World News Tonight broadcast at this time, we've been on the air for the last 10 hours as the country has endured or is trying to get through, as one official here in New York said, this horrendous attack on the United States today in both New York City and outside Washington at the Pentagon, and an attack that may or may not have gone wrong on Camp David in Maryland, the president's country retreat, but certainly resulted in the deaths of some people on yet another airliner today. So this is going to be a very different broadcast, and try to deal in the next half hour, as we have dealt with today, in a comprehensive way exactly what the United States has been through today. It began a little more than 10 hours, a little less than 10 hours ago, when first one aircraft, we'll take you through the video scenes of the day, when first one aircraft and then another hit and ultimately destroyed the twin trade towers, 110 stories high, on the west side of Manhattan. We didn't see the first one happen, even though television was on, and that is the astonishing second one, as seen by a freelance cameraman who joined us a short while ago. And he then stayed on to record this extraordinary, which we've seen from many angles, collapse to first one of the trade towers and then of the other. And the attack brought down these two towers upon themselves ultimately, and has left this extraordinary pile of rubble. Video brought to us from yet another person. Meanwhile, we have this crash at the Pentagon, 200 feet wide, concern at the White House. Obviously, the president was in Florida early today, but then, particularly when word that a fourth plane had been hijacked, which ultimately crashed in the Pennsylvania countryside outside Johnstown, Pennsylvania, not far from Pittsburgh. The President of the United States has spent part of this day in an underground bunker in Nebraska. He's on his way back to Washington now. He's going to speak to the nation tonight. The Navy's Atlantic Fleet was at one point diverted to come and bring aircraft carriers to New York Harbor so that they could assist. There's help and assistance descending on New York and Washington from a variety of places. And it's probably not at all unfair to say that the entire country is, in some measure, in shock as to what has happened to the United States in a psychological, symbolic, and very physical way on this particular day. In this half hour, we're going to try to put together just some of the more cogent reporting of our reporters who've been watching this throughout the day. And I want to go first to ABC's Diane Sawyer, who's been in Midtown Manhattan all day, gathering what she can. Diane.
All right, Peter, forgive me if I don't respond to you carefully, because it's still very noisy down here, and I'm going to kind of tell you what happened to me. We're now about 4 blocks from the scene, and as you can see, even at this hour, it's like being on the edge of the crater of a volcano. The smoke is still pouring out, the air is still acrid with fumes. Everywhere around me, I see haggard firefighters, exhausted policemen. And then in this eerie disconnect in New York, occasionally you see people just succumbing to the everyday and walking by. But still, when you look at this, it is clear it is not over, because as we know, within the last hour, another building came down, number 47, a 47-story building. And also they're saying they're evacuating now the Millennium Hotel, so this may not be over in a number of ways. As I said, when you walk around the streets of New York, and it's too easy probably to say that it's like one of those techno future thrillers where everything seems wrong, and yet people are carrying packages. They've been shopping while firefighters are still streaking their way down here. I also want to bring in, if I can, Don Daler, Peter, because Don has been down here all day. He was with us this morning as well. And about an hour ago, you made your way up to the scene, and you've had those pictures from the private photographer, Peter, but I want Don to tell us what he saw when he went to the scene himself.
Right, well, about an hour ago, we made our way down Broadway past where there were a large number of firemen gathered, very frustrated, very exhausted, because they were not being allowed to put out these fires in the number of the buildings around the site of the World Trade Center itself. There was too much danger for them to be going there. They wanted to go and work. We made our way past the firemen and got about half a block away from where this building on this side would have been standing. And there was billowing smoke. It was hard to see everything, but I clearly saw something worse than what Dante would have imagined. There was rubble, there was twisted metal, and I clearly saw bodies and what appeared to be body parts strewn on the street, on the rubble itself.
And people still working on the evacuations.
Working on
excavations.
Yes, but they were forcing, at the point I was there, the police were forcing everyone from emergency workers to the firemen away because there was such a fear, as you saw later, of a building collapse.
Well, I want to give you a sense again, Peter, of what it is like here when one of the buildings collapsed. We have here Jeff Rossen, who's from WABC, our affiliate, which has done great work today on this story. And Jeff, we have footage, and I hope we can cue it up, because we see this wall, this thunderous wall of smoke streaking down the street, and you were just ahead of it. And for all of you who were trying to escape it, what was that like?
Well, what happened was we saw this big cloud coming at us. It was dust and it was smoke, and we knew the people inside of it couldn't see anything because we saw them running at us. So our job was to just get out of the way. What happened was we couldn't get out of the way fast enough, and it caught up with us. We have people crying. They were creating a human chain, literally walking around like this because they couldn't see anything. At one point, we were stuck. We were at a store with a glass front, and we couldn't get in. There was no way to go. We couldn't breathe. We didn't have masks. So a police officer from New York, came in with an axe and literally just bashed in the window and led us into that store. If it wasn't for that, I'm not sure what we would have done, and that's been a huge problem all day. Couldn't just see anything, and that was the problem.
What was the heat like, and how suffocating was it for those trying to escape?
It was hot, but luckily we were a couple of blocks away, and the bigger problem was all the dust, and it got into your lungs, and you just kept coughing, and you couldn't speak, and you couldn't see. That, I mean, people were walking at the poles, people were crying and screaming. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
Well, again, these are just a couple of people who've been on the scene all day, Peter. And as we said, we have watched this footage. We have seen people both heroic, terrified, and mystified. And the scene out here tonight is really just one of complete, almost wounded numbness. And there's no other phrase I can summon at this moment to convey it to you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Diane Sawyer, who's been in Midtown Manhattan all day trying to get a grasp of the city and very effectively what's going on around her. Don Dahler from ABC News Good Morning America has been down with a couple of freelance photographers. It's freelance photographers who brought us the most intimate, the closest up video of what actually happened at the Twin Trade Towers today. It's a reminder of the world we live in. There's a camera pointed by somebody almost everywhere. Catch you up very quickly on a story to say again what we said before World News Tonight came on, which that U.S. officials speaking for some reasons on the conditions of anonymity say the United States is not involved in any of the violence going on in Kabul, the Afghanistan capital tonight. This appears to be an intra-Afghan affair, that the supporters of a leading anti-Taliban leader who was killed the other day have been rocketing the city tonight, so it has nothing, as best we can tell, to do with this. And then, of course, there was the Pentagon, and it just, think back 10 hours, it just began to pile up on us, one thing after the other. One was horrible, the next was third horrible. By the time the Pentagon attacked, shortly after the attack on the Twin Trade Towers, it was amazing. And here's ABC's John McCarthy, who's been there all day. John?
Peter, it was at 9:38 this morning. I was innocently sitting in my office at the Pentagon when there was a jolting blast on the other side of the building. You can see it over my shoulder. A large aircraft came down 395, which is a major highway. It clipped off the tops of many of the light poles on the way in, and it slammed into the building. You can see on the one side of the huge gash that 25 windows down along the Pentagon were destroyed. The section of the building that was hit by the fuselage of the aircraft collapsed several minutes after the aircraft hit it. I was able to get an exclusive walk up to the damaged site with some officials who got me through police lines. The area is surrounded with police evidence markings all over. There was a huge area for medical triage that is quiet now. And now they are continuing to fight fires inside the building, Peter, so they can go ahead and try and get anyone who may be still trapped in the rubble. It took them 5 hours before they were able to get into the building initially and begin to look for people who might be trapped and injured.
John, we heard a while ago, and there's some chaos here too, as you can understand, about a preliminary casualty figure at the Pentagon. Do you feel you have a good handle on that?
I do not have a good handle on it, Peter. There have been wild rumors from several hundred to over 1,000. It's impossible to know at this point, and I will not speculate.
And you may have said this most recently, and we would never want you to speculate, John. I believe you said now what you said earlier before, that the senior military officials at the Pentagon, none of them have been hurt to the best of your knowledge.
Don Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, is in just a few minutes going to hold a briefing inside the Pentagon for a very few number of reporters that are over there. And all of the military chiefs have been accounted for, and they have been spending the day in the National Military Command Center. Presumably, they have initially been looking at rescue options, but we also believe they are looking at retaliation options. But before that can happen, of course, the United States has to determine who they believe is responsible for this attack. I'll tell you, Peter, there is a pervasive sense of anger among the military officers I've talked to today. They have mentioned again and again Pearl Harbor, saying that it is going to be dwarfed. The number of people killed in Pearl Harbor so many years ago, just about 2,600. They say the casualties from this one are going to be so much worse. They are ready to go to war. There is a sense of war here at the Pentagon.
And thank you very much, John McWethy at the Pentagon. We'll be coming back to you many times in the course of the evening. The question is, go to war with whom? Because from the FBI, from the CIA, from the Pentagon today, no warning of this whatsoever, no knowledge of who's involved, no clues yet as to who's involved that we have heard about in any respect today. It has been interesting today to try to focus on the president, too, because the country does so clearly focus, I can't read that, I'm sorry, does focus on the president in a moment like this for leadership. And I believe that Ann Compton, who's been with the president all day, in a very tight group of people with the president, is on Air Force One and can talk to us at the moment. Annie, can you hear me?
Yes, Peter, I can. We're just getting off of Air Force One. He has arrived back in Washington with a dramatic flight with F-16s and F-15s on either wing as he came into Andrews Air Force Base. And the president feels it's important to address the nation tonight. Later this evening, he will give what we are told is a message of reassurance to Americans that the United States has been tested before and has always passed those tests. And when we saw him briefly toward the back of the plane, he was resolute.
Annie, thank you very much. And the president will take a helicopter, I gather, from Andrews Air Force Base downtown, or do we know that?
Well, we do know that, but it's one of the things we aren't going to talk about until he's safely at home.
We just did, inadvertently, and as we had not been told not to talk about it, but there was some question. The president does traditionally come from Andrews Air Force Base down, and one assumes, given the extraordinary security that's surrounded the president today and how the Secret Service has moved him first from Florida and then out to Nebraska and now to Louisiana, first of all, then to Nebraska and back to Washington, President all over the country. Here's the Secretary of Defense, Don Rumsfeld, who's been in the Pentagon all day. And we're having difficulty hearing him, and one should not be surprised if there isn't some kind of, if there's some kind of hookup that didn't work today. Very, very rarely today have we had a problem. So we'll have our reporter on the scene listen to this, and the moment that we can hear him, we will go back to him. But in the meantime, Claire Shipman is just outside the White House across Lafayette Square. Claire, I want to check in quickly with you, if I may, to know that if we know anything about the president's plans for this evening that we, in some respects, haven't had on the air today, or go beyond what Ann's reporting is.
Well, what we do know is that we're told by sources who've been with the president today that he is extremely upset, of course, about what has happened, but agitated and angry. Somebody told us that the language he will use tonight will be retaliatory. He will express his impatience. In other words, he will say there won't be a long time spent thinking about how to act once
Claire,
the U.S. is confident.
I apologize. I wouldn't interrupt you if
Sure.
we couldn't go back to Mr. Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. Well, the best laid plans. First of all, here we are.
Kind enough to come down and has been with us. We've very recently had a discussion with the President of the United States. Chairman Hugh Shelton has just landed from Europe. Secretary of the Army, Tom White, who has a responsibility for incidents like this, as executive agent for the Department of Defense, is also joining me. It's an indication that the United States government is functioning in the face of this terrible act against our country. I should
make no mistake about it. Your armed forces are ready.
Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman preceding Carl Levin, I can assure you that the Congress stands behind our president, and the president speaks with one voice for this entire nation. This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history, and yet I think it can be its finest hour, as our president and those with him, most notably our Secretary of Defense, our chairman, and the men and women of the armed forces all over this world stand ready not only to defend this nation and our allies against further attack, but to take such actions as are directed in the future in retaliation for this terrorist act, a series of terrorist acts unprecedented in world history. We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack. Again, I commend the Secretary, the Chairman, and how proud we are. We spoke with our President here moments ago. He's got a firm grip on this situation, and the Secretary and the General have a firm grip on our armed forces and in communication of the world over.
The Secretary of Defense, Carl Levin, Senator, Democratic Senator Carl. They're going to take questions. Let's stay here with this and see if anything is revealed.
Mr. Secretary, did you have any inkling at all, in any way, that something of this nature and something of this scope might be planned?
Charlie, we don't discuss intelligence matters.
I see. And how would you respond if you find out who did this?
Obviously, the President of the United States has spoken on that subject, and those are issues that he will address in good time.
Mr. Yes. Secretary, we are getting reports from CNN and others that there are bombs exploding in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are we at the moment striking back, and if so, is the target Osama bin Laden and his organization?
I've seen those reports. They, in no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
What about Osama bin Laden? Do you suspect him as the prime suspect in this?
It's not the time for discussions like that.
Mr. Secretary, you said you could not be specific about casualties. Can you give us some characterization of whether it's dozens or hundreds in the building?
Well, we know there were large number, many dozens in the aircraft that flew at full.
Were rushed from the grounds. If the Pentagon had been targeted, the Secret Service feared the president's home could be next.
Get everybody back! Everybody back!
Fire trucks took up positions on Pennsylvania Avenue, while SWAT teams stood vigil from the roof. Police sealed off a 2-block area around the White House. The only ones left inside the mansion, the Vice President and his national security team, coordinating a response to the crisis from the Situation Room. With the continuing threat in Washington, the Secret Service would not allow the president to return and had him fly immediately to the security of Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward.
The full scope of the tragedy now apparent, Mr. Bush addressed the nation and vowed these acts of terrorism will not stand.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
From Barksdale, the president headed for Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, home of the Strategic Air Command, where he conferred with his national security staff about how to proceed. Confident that the White House had been secured, he then headed back for Washington, determined to send a signal to the world that America would stand strong in the face of these horrible acts. And Dan, some more tough talk tonight from the president ahead of his address to the nation. A report just filed from aboard Air Force One. His spokesman, quoting the president, is saying, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation. We will do what it takes. No one is going to diminish the spirit of this nation." Dan?
John Roberts in Washington Live. John, what's the security situation at the White House at this moment?
Well, Dan, the White House is still locked down. We are not allowed back in. There is a small crew that's been allowed back in to tape the president live tonight at 9 o'clock. You can see the helicopters are just starting to arrive on the south lawn of the White House. Dan, as a security precaution, Air Force One, which is always shadowed by fighter jets wherever it travels, was more than shadowed today. On its way back from Nebraska, there was an F-15 positioned on each wing. And even now, Dan, every once in a while, we hear a fighter jet flying combat air patrol, if you will, over Washington, D.C., something this nation never thought they would see happen. Again, the president just now arriving back at the White House. We'll hear from him later on tonight.
At 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks, John Roberts. One of the few things that seems certain tonight is that these hijackings and attacks were meticulously planned and carried out with great precision. It also took a lot of money to do it. All of that is strongly supported by hard facts now at hand. CBS News correspondent Bob Orr, who covers it,
felt comfortable letting him chopper back to the White House was because there is substantial air cover in the area keeping him protected. But it has been a long day for him, as you noted, and he has, we're told from people who were with him, wanted to get back to the White House all day, but again was listening very closely to his security team, who wanted to be absolutely certain that that was going to be all right. We were talking earlier, the president is very eager to make plain tonight that his mood is retaliatory, to express impatience. We got a little bit of a hint of that from a statement from Ari Fleischer, his press secretary today, who said not so long ago, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation." I wouldn't be surprised to hear something like that from the president tonight. Equally eager to get back, Peter, just as the president is back, congressional leaders, they're planning to make a public statement tonight at 7:30 p.m. Again, everybody wanting to show this is business as usual in Washington, certainly not usual in the way we would ever define it, but they want to show a government that is up and functioning because they think that the PR element here, in terms of sending a message around the world, is every bit as important as security measures.
As we wait, I'm going to just bring in the voice of Charlie Gibson at the moment because I do not want to go away from this scene on what I assume is the south lawn of the White House. We'll just stay with this and watch the president come out. But Charlie, you've been trying to get some kind of handle on casualties throughout the day. Have had any success?
Well, no, Peter. People want a number, and as if it were some way to quantify these most horrific of acts. And properly, no one has been willing to speculate on what that number may be. Obviously, any low number would have to be ratcheted up at some point, and to give upper-end estimates are probably too horrible to imagine. As the mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, said, when we get the final number, it will be more than we can bear. The concern, obviously, is that there were emergency workers inside the World Trade Centers when they collapsed, when the Twin Towers came down, and the evacuations had not been completed. And as the Secretary of Defense said a moment ago, when we get the totals from the Pentagon, it will be a lot more than a few. We do have some estimates on injured, but again, these are highly unreliable. The mayor, again, saying at least 2,100 injured in New York, 1,500 taken to Liberty State Park across the Hudson River in New Jersey, 600 taken to hospitals, and the most chilling, one of the most chilling quotes that we've heard today, St. Vincent's Hospital here in New York had more than 200 injured. One doctor, Stephen Stern, saying there are hundreds of people burned head to toe. And we know many burn victims have been evacuated, some as far away as being taken to Canada, some being flown to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville. The military apparently flying those burn victims out.
Thanks, Tony. There he is, the president, coming back from a trip that has taken him first to Florida today to talk about education, when ironically the political establishment in Washington wanted to talk about federal budget and keeping the country out of recession. And then this happened just as the president was visiting a group of people. He learned about it, spoke to the people, then moved on to Louisiana and then out to Nebraska, where he went into a bunker totally reminiscent of the situation which the president might have found himself in and which the country prepared for during the Cold War, when the issue was nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union. And now, after something of a sharp debate, we gather, between the President's political staff and between the Secret Service, the President is coming home to the White House. There's nothing that this President, this new and young President, could ever have imagined was going to occur on his watch, which would test his leadership qualities so. And he is going, and how he responds, how he accommodates the country's frustration, and how he accommodates the country's anxiety and anger, and how he responds, or finds a way to respond, and as we've said many times, to whom will mark George Bush, however it goes, one way or the other. As he will speak to the nation at 9 o'clock tonight, and as Claire Shipman said to us, the representatives of the Congress, who've been pretty forthright today, earlier Senator Biden early today, saying that Congress must be seen to keep going, that the most important thing is that terrorists not be allowed to see that American life has been interrupted to any greater extent than it already has today. So we're going to hear in full later tonight, but we shall be on the air for the entire time for any development. Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us on a full-time basis from Washington, is in Seattle today. Among other things, the headquarters of the Boeing company, which had its aircraft involved in these hijackings today, 757 and a 767. What can you tell us, Lisa?
Well, Peter, it now appears that the weapon of choice appears to have been knives on board these planes. We know from reports from our sources and others that reports from flight attendants on an American flight and from passengers on two different flights, we're now learning. The United flight that went into the World Trade Tower, as well as the flight that went into the Pentagon. Cell phone calls from passengers on both those flights reported that men were on board with knives or box cutters, that flight attendants had been injured or killed, that people had stormed the cockpit. We also learned that on one of the flights, the American Airlines flight that went into the World Trade Tower, the flight attendant was also able to tell the American Airlines Operations Center, she reached them and told them what was going on board. She was able to tell them the actual seat number of the passenger who was causing the problems on the plane. So that may lead authorities at least to one name, at least the name of the person who booked that ticket. She was able to give that information to the people at American Airlines. Obviously, this was a major security breach at 3 U.S. airports. There will be a lot of talk, as there is already, about how this could possibly have happened. One person told me these are obviously shocking events, but not that surprising. There have been a number of reports throughout the years about security problems at U.S. airports. The Department of Transportation Inspector General, the GAO, all of those groups have done reports talking about how easy it is to penetrate secure areas, to get on airplanes, how easy it is to get devices past the people who are checking you at the screening machines. So obviously this will be a focus of the investigation to find out how these people got on board and how the weapons got on board as well. Peter?
Lisa Stark, who is in Seattle for us tonight, and gives us one additional piece of information I think we have not had earlier today, which was that one of the people on board the American Airlines flight that was, I think she said, Lisa, are you still there? Lisa Stark's still there. I think she said was the first flight, the first aircraft today, which run into the trade towers, that somebody on board did manage to give some security operators at American Airlines headquarters the number of a seat in which one of the hijackers or terrorists was occupying. Am I correct in that,
Correct.
Lisa?
That was the American Airlines Flight 11. It was the one that went into one of the two that went into the World Trade Tower. The flight attendant was able to tell American Airlines Operations identified the actual seat number of the person involved in the hijacking. So that may help authorities. And Peter, I want to add one other thing. I did manage to talk to a number of controllers in the New York area today. They told me that they realized by the time the second plane was heading to the World Trade Tower what was going to happen. They said they had a helpless feeling. All they could do was watch the blip on the screen. At that point, of course, there was nothing that they could do.
Okay, thanks very much. Lisa Stark in Seattle tonight, the headquarters of the Boeing Company, or at least part of the headquarters of the Boeing Company, and they've moved to Chicago. But there's three major violations of security, or breaches of security to be fair, at Dulles Airport just outside Washington, at Boston, and as somebody pointed earlier, it could have been any number of flights leaving from Boston today, and at Newark Airport, a flight headed for the West Coast as well, all three of which, given the fact that they were going to be transcontinental flights, would have had huge amounts of fuel on board. It was John Miller who first brought us that piece of information. And John, I don't think anybody's been in quite as close touch as you have with the cops, the firefighters here in New York City today. As we get to this point, a little more than 10 hours after this incident, what do you, not your conclusion, what's your interim conclusion of where we're at?
Well, three things are happening. One, the very basics. The FBI has activated its command post in New York and set up, well, in FBI slang, it's a lead bucket. As all leads come in, they're entered into computers and agents are assigned to go out and check them out. This covers everything from crazy crank calls about people who suspect people.
The trade towers, the damage left many of them shocked at the near total devastation. There's no way to estimate casualties. Thousands are believed dead. For those used to saving lives, the frustration is overwhelming.
When you start talking to a New York police officer and they start crying for what they've seen in the last couple hours, you know the seriousness and the gravity of the situation.
Throughout the day, rescuers have faced a terrible choice with hundreds, perhaps thousands of people trapped in the rubble in there. When is it safe to go back in? And Tom, the most vivid example of that, referred to by David Bloom a little while ago, that of course the loss of Building 7 of the World Trade Center just over my shoulder, which tumbled to the ground 8 hours after this attack began. Tom?
NBC's Pat Dawson in Lower Manhattan tonight, and of course for many of the people who lived through all of that, it will be one of the unforgettable moments of their lives. NBC's Ann Thompson was in the vicinity of the World Trade Center when the buildings began to come down. Ann?
Tom, this is the view tonight down West Broadway. Smoke's filling the air where the two towers in building number 7 stood. In the last hour, we have seen busloads of police, of doctors, and ambulance after ambulance go into that area to try to repair a city that's been mortally wounded by this attack. A direct hit that shattered New York City's confidence.
Well, as soon as the first building collapsed, everybody made a mad dash to just take cover.
And everybody just started running. I just happened to duck right into the post office.
As soon as we got out of the train station, people were screaming and crying and yelling, and it was just total chaos, and the bottom of our building was blown out.
For me, Ground Zero, Fulton and Broadway, about 2 blocks from the World Trade Center, just as the South Tower crumbled. Hollywood could never imagine something like this. A tidal wave of smoke and debris came roaring down Broadway. I was standing at the corner of Fulton and Broadway. I ran into a building, ran between a column and a building at 195 Broadway, and pushed my face and my body into that building. For what seemed like 5 minutes, I was pelted with all kinds of debris. I crouched down, was coughing, trying to breathe. You couldn't get any air. The air was so full of smoke and dust. When it finally settled, I stood up. My glasses were covered with dust. Hours later, I'm still covered with dust. The building that I was in front of, 195 Broadway, the doors were gated shut. They opened the doors, let us in, and inside we were finally able to breathe. It wasn't easy. My eyes were filled with dust. My mouth was filled with dust. I was choking. The people I was with were choking. It was just absolutely horrific. All I could think of was, this is war.
I just heard the rumble, and then I ran like hell, and there was a large wind coming.
Down here, panic. Survivors flee by whatever means they can, fearing more destruction at any moment. At 10:30, I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandelier shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Everyone, please clear the corner.
Palpable fear as people run through the streets, choking on dust and debris.
You gotta chase it. Come on, let's go, let's go.
We saw the building come down. We all ran, and the walkway held up to save like 40 or 50 of us that were right there. We were buried there, and then cops shot out windows in the next building. It was the only thing that was in front of us was like these 1-inch windows.
The streets of the financial district covered with debris, in some cases ankle deep. Cars on fire, cars just turned by the force of the explosions. It was like something no one had ever seen. Panic, like smoke, heads uptown. Officials ordering precautionary evacuations of some of New York City's landmarks.
This is an orderly evacuation of 30 Rockefeller Plaza.
On the street, anxious commuters trying to call home, cell phone service dead. At Grand Central Station, travelers desperate to get out of the city.
It's gonna take a long time, but you're gonna see Mama and Papa today, okay?
Outside the station, a surreal scene. People buying postcards of the Twin Towers that no longer exist. As the day wears on, witnesses who survived the attack now face a new horror, searching for missing friends and co-workers.
We can't account for all of our employees. We're just in a state of shock.
The biggest, busiest city in the world, the attack revives fears of the 1993 bombing. Suddenly, nowhere in the financial district seems safe. Did you ever think this could happen again?
No, I really didn't. I lived through the first one.
After a tragedy so great, tonight a city comes together, searching for safety and comfort. Tom, now this area is more than just a business district. It is also where people live. And within the last hour, we have seen families bringing suitcases, crates carrying their family pets to leave and to go elsewhere. They have no water, they have no gas, and there is also the fear that more buildings will collapse. The area is covered by police from all over New York.
Soot and rubble were everywhere, and with it, chaos.
Get out of here! Move it! Come on!
What scared me the most was the panic, and people were running, and you just saw this great big cloud of dust just coming from the center of the building and mushrooming out towards the river. There was people had no place to go. People were going to jump in the river. They were going to swim. They were jumping on a boat. They were breaking glass to get into nearby homes and restaurants.
There was, dust and whatnot everywhere, but it was...
The second building has just come down.
You okay, officer?
Firefighters and police officers found themselves momentarily helpless. Trained to save others, they suddenly had to save themselves.
It's a war. We've been attacked. It's like World War II. It's World War II. This is unbelievable.
Tonight, crews are standing by to start searching for the thousands of people feared missing in the debris. James Walker, ABC News, New York.
Well, you hear of fire. Nobody is accustomed to tragedy to a greater extent than firefighters, and you hear of a firefighter there describing it as World War II. I want to go back and reach into our earlier coverage today for a couple of things. But first, I know that most of the people at ABC News bureaus around the country are out covering the story. Any of them who we can get to come in and give us some sense of the mood of the country as a whole at the moment would be very much appreciated, even if they call in on the telephone. A little earlier today, ABC's Lynn Scher put together a package for us in which we asked someone to take the radar monitoring that the Federal Aviation Administration does of the entire country in components all the way across the country of this one particular aircraft that they were able to track from Boston, maneuvering in such a way that it became clear to them at a horrifying moment that this was an aircraft not following its flight plan, that was headed to New York City. And if you put that together with the sense that some people got from the aircraft that there was something going on board these aircraft, simply horrified everybody in the law enforcement establishment, not to mention the two airlines, American and United, are involved. And Charlie Gibson and I have just momentarily been talking about this. Have we got this video available? Can we just move this video up and we'll listen first to the man who tracked this one aircraft. Remember, there were two. Tracked this one aircraft as it was headed towards New York City.
Plane
plane took off about 8 o'clock out of Logan in Boston on its way to Los Angeles, climbed to 29,000 feet and cruising at about 450 knots. About that time, 8:28, the flight took an immediate hard left turn due south. The speed initially decreased by over 100 miles an hour and then increased to over 500. And then as it approached the New York area, it slowed to all the way down to about 300 knots. So, and then tragically it impacted in the World Trade Center. American 11 was indeed the first flight. We have confirmed that of the two.
But as ABC's Charlie Gibson points out in this conversation with me just a moment, with Charlie, there were 2 rogue aircraft who were out of flight pattern.
Well, Peter, the 2 airplanes that hit the 2 twin towers of the World Trade Center were both out of Boston. That was a description of what happened to Flight 11, which was the first one to come into the towers. And just looking at the timing, it's interesting. The plane took off at exactly 8 o'clock from Logan Airport in Boston, and it was at 8:28 that it took that hard left-hand turn and then crashed into the World Trade Center at about 8:45. So that means for 17 minutes, some air traffic controller had to know that they had a rogue aircraft on their hands heading for New York City. The other flight, the one that went into the second World Trade Center, and that was United Flight 175, a 767 that had taken off for Boston for Los Angeles, took off at 8:15. Then just after it passed the Massachusetts-Connecticut border heading west, just south of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the flight took a 30-degree turn to the south, left toward New Jersey, then another 90-degree turn. It was heading toward Atlantic City, and then it took another hard turn northeast, basically doing a U-turn over New Jersey and slammed into the to the building at 9:03. So again, for a considerable period of time, the air traffic controllers had to know that they had not 1 but 2 rogue aircrafts heading for New York.
Thanks, Charlie, very much. Now we want to go to Washington. I think it's Washington because the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, is about to make a public appearance in the White House press room with the man, of course, responsible for the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Today, America has experienced one of the greatest tragedies ever witnessed on our soil. These heinous acts of violence are an assault on the security of our nation. They are an assault on the security and the freedom of every American citizen. We will not tolerate such acts. We will expend every effort and devote all the necessary resources to bring the people responsible for these acts, these crimes, to justice. Now is the time for us to come together as a nation to offer our support, our prayers for victims and for their families, for the rescue workers, for law enforcement officials, for every one of us that has been changed forever by this horrible tragedy. The following is a summary of the known facts surrounding today's incidents. American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center. United Airlines Flight 175 departed Boston for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 departed Washington Dulles for Los Angeles, was hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 departed Newark for San Francisco, was hijacked and crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Crime scenes have been established by the federal authorities in New York, in Washington, D.C. area, in Pittsburgh, in Boston, and in Newark. The full resources of the Department of Justice, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the U.S. Attorney's offices, the U.S. Marshals Service, the Bureau of Prisons, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Office of Justice Programs are being deployed to investigate these crimes and to assist survivors and victim families. Thousands of FBI agents in all of the field offices across the country and in the international legat offices, assisted by personnel from other Department of Justice agencies, are cooperating in this investigation. The FBI has established a website where people can report any information about these crimes. That address is www.ifccfbi.gov. That address again, www.ifccfbi.gov. Individuals can report any information they know about these crimes to that website. It takes courage for individuals to come forward in situations like this, and I urge anyone with information that may be useful and helpful to authorities to use this opportunity. The Office of Victims of Crime has established a toll-free 800 number for family and friends of victims. They can call 800-331-0075 to leave contact information for a future time when more information is available, to find out information about a victim, or to find out information about the rights of victims and the services available to victim survivors and victim families. The determination of these terrorists will not deter the determination of the American people. We are survivors, and freedom is a survivor. A free American people will not be intimidated, nor will we be defeated. We will find the people responsible for these cowardly acts, and justice will be done. Tommy.
On Ashcroft. And this is Tommy Thompson,
Every single
Secretary of
American
Health and Human Services.
Lost something today.
Well, I do not know whether that was a spontaneous gesture, but whether it was or was not. To see members of the House and the Senate, men and women, hugging each other in the face of this attack on the country, standing together on the steps of the Capitol on the evening of the 11th day of the month, 9th month of the year, singing God Bless America, surely reflects some heartfelt attempt by the members of the Congress to say to the world that this is a unified nation in the face of tragedy, as it has, for the most part, always been thus. A couple of very important numbers and website things have just been talked about by former Senator John Ashcroft, now the head of the Justice Department, the Attorney General of the United States. And I want to just read them out a little, one more time slowly, because they're important. The first, as the Justice Department in general and all of the intelligence agencies led by the FBI in this case begin to troll for information as to who may have perpetrated these acts of terror and horror, the Attorney General offers a website. If you have a pencil or a pen, it's www.ifccfbi.gov. As I expected someone to make a graphic. Thank you very much. And this is a telephone number coming now, which I think many people in the country will have been desperate to hear. It's the first time we've heard it today. This is a Victims of Crime hotline, which the government has established, and it is 1-800-331-0075. 1-800-331-0075. And this is particularly for people who may have had family, primarily for family, relatives, who they fear for in either the attacks on the trade tower or at this point, as we know, in the Pentagon, because we haven't had a number from the Pentagon yet, and certainly on the aircraft on which 266 lives, we estimate, were lost today. To call in, leave a contact number, and then somebody will get back to you. And that'll be one of those hellish waits that people have to go through when they know or suspect that they're relatives. And we've been getting messages here from people all over the world at the moment who believe they had a relative or contact, particularly a relative, involved in the violence of today. Getting dark in New York City, of course. It's about 7:30 Eastern Time. The days are getting shorter everywhere in the country. We want to try to give you a little bit of a sense of the country now in two reports that we have prepared for World News Tonight, and clearly didn't get on because so much was happening at the moment. The first is from Erin Hayes, who's our correspondent based in Atlanta, and this is what she finds today, if one could call it the mood of the South that she has discovered.
Read all about it.
There is, rippling across this country,
Suicide bombers, suicide bombers.
Great fear tonight. This attack was on every American.
I can't believe it. And it's so sad that it's come to this.
The first thing I thought of this morning when I saw that was Hiroshima, Pearl Harbor, all over again. The horror of it. And thinking that we're headed for World War III.
I want to go home to my family right now. That's what I want to do, get close to my kids.
We were seeing things we have never seen before, not just on our TV sets, but signs all around that this is as serious as it gets. At the airports is where it was most obvious, the national confusion.
I'm really scared. I feel helpless.
Paralysis.
All the lines on the cell phones are all busy.
Planes making their way to the first airport in sight. Unloaded passengers stunned to find themselves in places they had no plans to be, unsure what to do.
I'm just totally shook up right now because we were in the air when it happened. We're not told anything about it.
They said good luck, sleep in the airport.
And in city after city, anxious officials evacuated one building after another.
Our boss just finally came and told us, just go ahead and leave.
Not because of actual threats, but because no one knew what might be next.
There is a war here now.
We are a nation now on high alert, not just militarily, but psychologically, shaken on every level.
Just waiting.
For what?
To see if anything else is going to happen. To see if we're going to be attacked here in Atlanta.
It's a very strange feeling to be so threatened.
The uncertainty set in motion a wave of shutting down across the nation. Not just the obvious, government buildings, but malls in Georgia and theme parks in Florida.
Due to unforeseen circumstances, the Magic Kingdom is now closing.
And schools everywhere.
Our military at home and around the world.
And in those classrooms still in session, you could hear the anxiety of the youngest generations, for whom this kind of attack had been limited to their history lessons until today.
They hit the Pentagon. It's a slap in the face. It's the nerve center of our military, and they hit the Pentagon? What is that?
I always thought America was like my superhero, like nothing could harm America. I mean, America is everyone's defender.
This is an attack on our generation. It is an attack on our culture, our system, our values, what we do.
There is a growing sense tonight that what we do now will truly define us as a nation.
I'd hate to see panic, because then whoever did this will win, and we can't let them win.
We are Americans, and I'm glad I am an American. We need, we just need to come together, and I think we will.
It will take that and much more in the coming days to see the nation, the entire nation, through this.
Head that way.
Erin Hayes, ABC News, Atlanta.
One never thinks of a citizen as being an ordinary citizen, but from those citizens, three expressions at least which are worth holding. The young man who said it's a slap at the face of the Pentagon, he couldn't imagine it. The young person who said it's an attack on our culture and our country and our military. It's not really hard to say it's an attack on the American culture because there's so many cultures here at the moment, but I think you know what he means. And young people who just couldn't believe that they were seeing what they were going to witness today. But as everybody in the country has experienced today, this is a new reality for the United States. We saw it first in Oklahoma City. We've seen it in any number of threats and the growing security that has been involved with our public life in the last several years, but nothing like this. So now go to California, where a similar report for us today from ABC's David Wright.
In Minnesota, the Mall of America never opened today. In Chicago, Navy Pier and the Lincoln Park Zoo were closed. In Orlando, even the Magic Kingdom was shut down. Just about any place in America where large numbers of people were likely to gather locked the doors and sent people home.
Nothing's going to get done today. It's going to be a miserable day.
With all of the nation's airliners grounded, thousands of travelers were stranded.
I probably feel safer in Europe if I could actually get over there right now.
It's horrible, and as Americans, we're totally unprepared for that. We just don't think that terrorism is going to hit in our backyard.
In Los Angeles, grief counselors were brought in to meet with family members of the 3 Los Angeles-bound planes that were hijacked and used by the terrorists. In San Francisco, one of the few planes left in the skies, a flight from Thailand, was escorted in by fighter jets.
I'm really scared. I feel helpless.
The workday routine was disrupted the country over, and rush hour extended through most of the day as people struggled to get home or just someplace they perceived to be safer. In Denver, people did what they could for the victims thousands of miles away. The blood banks were full of people eager to give. Here in LA, the entertainment industry has shut down production. Madonna canceled one of the final concerts of her national tour. The Latin Grammy Awards, scheduled for tonight, and the Emmys, scheduled for Sunday, are postponed indefinitely. And across the country, Major League Baseball has canceled its entire schedule. The disruption is likely to continue for at least a few days. Financial markets will remain closed through tomorrow, and the post office says the U.S. mail will be slowed, but will keep coming.
This is a News Source 13 special report.
Good evening, I'm Don Eilhart. We continue our special coverage, taking time, of course, to bring you up to date on what is happening locally and how we're being impacted here by what is taking place in New York City and our nation's capital. I'm Don Eilhart.
I'm Jenny Ryan. A number of things to update you on. We have learned within the half hour that the county's Emergency Operations Center has just returned to normal operations. Their mission is disasters, but even for them, today was not a normal day.
We're here for blizzards, we're here for floods, we've been here for other community types emergencies. Most of them are weather related. This type of occurrence is few and far between, thankfully.
Again, the county's Emergency Operations Center is back to normal operations. That happened around 6:30 tonight. And County Executive Jack Doyle says all county offices will reopen tomorrow, many of them closing today. The airport remains closed. It is expected to remain closed until at least tomorrow. Rochester City Schools will be open tomorrow. We have not heard yet from other districts yet. Assume they are open. We'll try to bring you that information on the lower half of your screen as the night wears on.
We talk a lot about buildings, we talk a lot about meetings, and now as this wears on, we're finding out more and more about the individuals that are affected by this and those from the Rochester area. Unimaginable uncertainty and grief for people waiting for word on family and friends at the World Trade Center, among them a Honeoye Falls family. They believe 24-year-old Brandon Buchanan was at work at his office on the 104th floor when the first plane hit. The Buchanan family has not heard from Brandon other than a call he placed to his girlfriend from that building immediately after the attack. Brandon works as a financial trader in New York.
We have received several calls from area churches tonight, too many to count. There are several special prayer services going on throughout the area. News Source 13's Brian Washington is...
Passengers and flight attendants we talked to share a mixed sense of frustration, sadness, and relief about this entire situation. Many were on their way to New York City when their planes turned around in the air and came right back to Rochester. Timothy Smith is in Rochester on business. He wasn't headed to New York today, but he is a frequent business traveler. Smith was scheduled to be in Dallas tomorrow. Instead, he will stay at a local hotel as long as he needs to.
What scared me more initially is that someone could take over our airplanes and crash them into buildings, let alone the additional effect of the many lives that are lost. I mean, that's just tragedy.
Many passengers turning their thoughts to the victims of these two attacks. Now, we also talked to a flight attendant staying at another hotel this afternoon. She says in spite of the size of the airline industry, it is a tight-knit industry. She says tonight she and other crew members who are in Rochester tonight stranded here will pray and wait to hear if any of their colleagues were on board the planes that crashed.
All right, News Source 13's Norma Holland in our newsroom. A number of stories locally we're following up tonight.
And we want to pass along, too, before we rejoin the network, we're beginning to see the country come together. Members of Congress a short while ago speaking out very strongly. And we're going to hear from the President of the United States, who has been in the air much of his day himself, being shuttled from one Air Force base to another, back at the White House within the past couple of hours. And he will be addressing the nation at 9 o'clock tonight, about an hour and 15 minutes from now. We also want to remind you that if you need more information before we come back, our website, iknowrochester.com, and some of those links, if you want to get to American Airlines, AA.com, for example, trying to be updated throughout the night. We're finding that the web is perhaps one way to keep people informed about what's going on.
We just got informed that the president will now speak at 8:30 tonight. His speech has been moved up from 9 until 8:30, so about 45 minutes from now. And we also know that ABC News will stay on the air through tomorrow night.
And as we said, through tomorrow night, most of this day, our normal newscasts have been preempted, but we are here pretty much on the hour. We'll be back at 11 o'clock again tonight to bring you updates on what is happening locally as Rochester reacts to terrorism in the skies over New York City.
Communications and fuel difficulty. This must have just been the most. We know what we're dealing with
now in Stoystown, Pennsylvania. It crashed, and I believe we have some pictures of the crash scene. Crashed in an open field. All that you really see there is a huge crater. You can't even see it very well from our vantage point. A huge black gaping hole, as investigators are describing it. There is a lot of debris, most of it very small pieces of black charred remains. The FBI tonight is making a huge grid, and tomorrow morning it will begin what it calls a painstaking process of gathering the evidence. At this point, they say they're treating this as a crime, though they won't go so far as to say it is indeed an act of terrorism. If indeed the plane had successfully turned around and headed back toward Washington, and now it appears there would have been one more target. It did not make it, which is fortunate for Washington, unfortunate for the 45 people on board. No survivors, Peter.
Dan, it was indeed a chilling moment when you made a reference there to United Flight 93 asking for a change of flight plan, headed for San Francisco, asking for a flight plan that takes it to Washington. Have you picked up anything else on the ground tonight?
We have picked up from the FBI that there was 911 contact from the plane. Now, they wouldn't go so far as to confirm a report that has been circulating. The report says that one of the passengers locked himself in the bathroom of that plane and called 911 at 9:58 a.m., got in touch with a local 911 operator in this part of Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, and told him there had been some sort of explosion on the plane. Shortly after that, 2 minutes later, in fact, the plane did go down. That report is not confirmed in total in some. However, the FBI says it has received tapes of a 911 call, and it is going to go over those tapes.
Just help us place Stoystown, Pennsylvania, a little more, with a little greater familiarity to people. You're fairly close to Johnstown?
We are fairly close to Johnstown. Stoystown is about 75 miles southeast of Pittsburgh and about 30 miles north of Maryland. It's a very rural area, and the area where the crash happened is really very, very rural. It's an open field, and as I said, there is a huge crater. There were some eyewitnesses, coal workers, who ran to the scene shortly after the crash. We've heard that they saw the plane going down. It was very unstable before it went down, as you might imagine. People who live nearby say they heard they felt the ground shake miles away. People who went to the scene, we spoke to one eyewitness a short time ago, said she saw lots of debris, but nothing very big. And in fact, that's what our pictures are bearing out, that the debris is very, very small. This made a very hard landing, Peter.
Thanks very much, Dan Harris in Stoystown, Pennsylvania tonight on the United Airlines flight, which started off from Newark to San Francisco, took off about 8:01. You see where it all converges? The first attack on the trade tower is just before 9 o'clock. The second one is after that, that an aircraft goes down at, sometime 8:35, between 8:30, maybe a little after 9 o'clock. And so the coordination involved in this has intelligence and military officials tonight confused, shocked, and steamed. Barbara Starr, one of our reporters of the Pentagon, reports tonight, quoting a senior intelligence official, our top priority tonight is nailing the SOBs who did this. And they are, Barbara reports us, tweaking every single intelligence system they have, their reconnaissance, their assets. And then they're going to go through, as we've heard earlier today, through all of the cable traffic. They're going to look to listen to all of the monitoring which the National Security Agency does of thousands of phone calls. And again, though this may not lead to anything, just a short while ago, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, told the Associated Press that U.S. intelligence intercepted communications between supporters of Osama bin Laden discussing the attacks on the World Trade Center. And he then goes on to say, I'm just going to get his quote accurately here, they have an intercept of some information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. I'm not sure how much that tells us at this point. They may simply having been reacting, if this report is true, they may simply have been reacting, as many people all over the world did immediately, to the fact that these attacks had actually occurred. It's not going to be very long from now before the president. I'm missing anything, John, before I go back to Washington and talk politics?
No, we're up to date.
Okay. John McCarthy, outside the Pentagon, unusually removed from your post, which I know must be very frustrating at this point, John. Want to add to Barbara Starr's reporting in terms of attitude on behalf of the military at the moment?
Well, attitude and what you described as the intelligence community is now doing is a major wash. They are going after every agent they have all over the globe. They are focusing every piece of technology they have. They are desperately looking for answers to who did it, so they can then better go after who did it with what undoubtedly I now believe is going to be a series of military strikes. But you cannot do that until you have a very focused piece of intelligence that leads you directly to the culprits. And then there is, of course, the problem, once you decide you are going to use military force, of trying to decide how to make it in any way effective. It does feel good oftentimes to retaliate against accused people that you believe have done a terrible act like this to the United States, but it doesn't necessarily go after them and often creates additional problems, especially if it is proved that the terrorists who did this came from a region near the Middle East, like Afghanistan. That is going to set off a whole series of very complex political machinations, Peter, that could end up coming back on the United States.
But let me ask you an operational question, John. We believe at the moment that the United States had no inkling of what was going to happen, but there's a history of terrorism in various other parts of the world to which the United States has been party, victimized by in one way or the other. After an incident has occurred, is there any history of a tendency of people who've perpetrated the terrorism to talk?
There is a history to claim credit in some way. Although I must say, Osama bin Laden, if he turns out to be the culprit who is behind this, has been often circumspect in the days and months after an attack. Intelligence sources have indicated in previous attacks that his organization was involved, but they had to piece that information together because he was, at least in the initial period after the attack, absolutely silent.
Thank you very much, John McCarthy. We have a microphone open somewhere else, and I think just trying to pick up the sound, that it is in our Washington position across from the White House. It's appropriate because we want to go there now where Claire Shipman has been for most of the day. And Claire, the president, I think, is going, you tell us clearly, the president's going to talk to us, I think, fairly quickly now, pretty soon now?
That's right. He's going to talk to us, we're told, in just over 10 minutes, Peter. And I think what you've been talking about tonight, a lot
Claire,
of
let
anger...
me stop. Can I stop you? Maybe you'd move your microphone up. I'm sorry. There's a microphone, I believe, in your little location there, which is interfering with what you are trying to say. So do you want to try again?
All right. Is this any better?
It's somewhat better, yeah.
Good. Okay. Rough conditions here. But you've been talking about a lot of the anger being expressed in Washington tonight from military officials and others. And
the United States, though, as always, the intelligence community has gone almost immediately to Osama bin Laden as a principal suspect. And we don't know why they have done that, but it seems to be something of a tradition. It was great to see. It was really great to see the members of Congress gather and sing God Bless America, and to tell the country and the world that countries hanging together. But there was a time earlier today when the capital city was just closing down as absolutely fast as they could get it closed down. Take a look at this report from ABC's Michelle Norris.
With the Pentagon burning in the distance, the nation's capital was evacuated.
This is the first time we had a mandatory evacuation of the Capitol and the House and Senate office buildings.
Bewildered employees got out as fast as they could, while key congressional leaders were carefully whisked away to safe and undisclosed locations. Top leaders from throughout the administration were immediately placed under special protection.
The leaders are in undisclosed locations for their own safety and to ensure that we can reconstitute decision-making when that's appropriate.
The United States Secret Service immediately secured the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House, and they are all safe.
It's all part of official Washington's civil defense plan to ensure that the federal government continues to function smoothly even while the nation is under attack.
And they basically have a playbook initially to assess how serious is this threat. Do we need to have a lot of people move very far away from Washington, or do we just need to have a few key backup people get outside of the immediate downtown area?
During the Cold War, the federal government developed an elaborate evacuation plan to make sure top leaders would survive a nuclear attack by taking them to a series of secret bunkers just outside Washington. Today, that wasn't necessary, but nonetheless, the nation's top decision makers remain under very heavy protection.
Making sure that the federal government continues to function, I think, is very important in a time of crisis because it reassures the public that somebody is in charge and the situation is well in hand.
And in today's time of crisis, Americans, as well as many elsewhere in the world, will be looking for that reassurance. Michelle Norris, ABC News, Washington.
Information is pouring into our newsroom from everywhere, trying to understand this. Here's a message from a friend who happens to be an architectural engineer who knows something about the World Trade Center and who believes that a member of the family may have been killed in the Trade Center at all. It's been impossible for it. We've only had one person, at least on this broadcast, identified all day, and that is the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, who managed to call her husband from the aircraft that was hijacked and then subsequently attacked the Pentagon. But he, an engineer and an architect, speculates here that the heat above the crash site on the twin trade towers may have indeed caused the building above to melt, just simply collapsing in itself and putting enormous weight on the rest of the building below, which could not possibly stand it. And the steel columns which go up through the building, built to code at best, would only be able, he believes, to have been able to stand an hour and a half of intense fire like this, pressing down on the rest of the building until it finally was able to give way. It was a very well-built building, probably better, given its size and the attention and everything else, much better than similar buildings built today because it was the first of its style. And as we know, in many American cities as well as overseas, there are a lot more daring architectural structures of this magnitude in many parts of the world today. In Asia particularly, people building these astonishingly high buildings as showplaces, almost a competition going on in the rest of the world as to who can build the tallest, most daring building. Well, there's a very simple, long box structure built well, according to the engineers who know it. And the heat of that fire from those penetrations of the two aircraft, in his view, may have made the difference. It will take us time to find out. John Miller, latest.
There's really no change other than rescue operations have started now at the World Trade Center, ones that were hampered because of the impending collapse of 7 World Trade Center, the third building to go down. Bodies have started to be brought to the morgue, but only in very small numbers now. That's going to be a massive operation that continues. And of course, as we've all discussed, the mounting of a massive federal investigation in tandem with the intelligence community's assistance to the military to try to put a name to this.
I wonder if anybody else is as aware as I am at the moment. I'm sure people are aware as I am at the moment of previous investigations we have done of far lesser incidents. Attack on TWA 800 is one. The investigation at the Al-Khobar Towers, which was conducted by retired General Wayne Downing, who's with us in our Washington Bureau. We'll talk to him after the president tonight. All of these investigations have gone on and on and on and on, and many of them just really didn't resolve anything in the final analysis.
Yet many of them did. The largest acts of terrorism on U.S. soil, ironically the bombing of the World Trade Center, the attacks in East Africa have been solved to the extent that people have been charged. Many have been brought back to this country. The FBI actually has a terrific track record that way in chasing these leads out to the ends of the earth. We were talking about something a minute ago, though, that is part of the fog of war in these things. After the El Khobar explosion, there were intercepts of people calling Osama bin Laden's headquarters to congratulate him. And in these intercepts, there was no, he didn't say, well, thanks, but it wasn't me. Now the government has taken the position that it was the Iranians. So you really have to sort through the information very carefully before you choose your suspect.
Yeah, I just simply wish to make the point that it's going to take a long time, and that the impatience that we all feel about striking back at somebody who's done this thing to the country is not going to be requited, I think, for very long. ABC's Pierre Thomas, by the way, reports that his FBI sources are telling him that several people on board two of the planes which went down, this would be the one of the Pentagon, at least one of those coming either to New York or to Pennsylvania, were able to get out on their cell phones and call their relatives. And they described horrific scenes on board the aircraft, people being attacked and stabbed on board the aircraft itself. We've heard at least one piece of information that the weapon of choice, at least on one of the aircraft, was a box cutter, what professionals and sometimes amateur use with the razor blade through it that enables you to open up cardboard boxes in a hurry, and has, of course, been a weapon of crime with which we're all familiar. And as John Miller, who knows more about these things than most, pointed out easier, you take a plastic one on board and it's very hard for a security device to detect. But I want to go quickly to Midtown New York City again, just before we go to the president, and get a quick update from Diane Sawyer. Diane?
Peter, I'm standing out here, and as you can see around me, there's a dramatic change in activity, and I don't know how much you could hear earlier when we were telling you about it, but we have 6 bulldozers down here now. We have an entire line, an entire street full of EMS crews and ambulances. It appears they have got the lights up. The generators are working, and it's very possible they could be moving in soon for some kind of activity actually on the site. And I've got Don Daler here with me. We've been dividing up all the duties here, and he's been down to the scene. And also J.D. Halpern, who said he's just a volunteer who came in from California and was around the area. I just wanted to know, how much fire is there? You said you were just at ground zero. How much fire is left?
Well, the building 7, there was no fire there whatsoever, but there was one truck putting water on the building, but it's collapsed completely. And then the other building that there were some flames still coming up was in World Trade Center 1, but not a lot.
And you said you saw melted tour buses, melted cars?
The cars that were right down there, it was just unbelievable. They were twisted and melted into nothing. The debris is just unbelievable. And then you can see fire trucks and police vehicles that were down there early that all their windows, the windshields are completely blown out must have been from when debris dropped.
We can even see from here that the smoke seems to have gone down, Don. And I want to repeat, Peter, because J.D. was saying, as well as Don earlier, in case you didn't hear us, that it is carpeted up there. It is ankle deep in papers.
In some places, papers and debris go up 2 or 3 feet high. You have to wade through in some areas.
These are financial documents.
Yeah, the ones I looked at, many of them were financial documents, very personal documents that when I saw the first explosion that hit, there was just a snow cascade of paper, and the whole area down there is just coated with it.
Well, Peter, again, we'll let you know as soon as we can confirm that they are going in to the site. We should say that the mayor was here just a minute ago and drove by, waved at us, but would not stop. Back to you.
Diane, just exactly where are you?
We're about 4.5 blocks from ground zero.
Okay, thank you very much. Diane Sawyer, Don Daly. Don Daly did a wonderful job for us earlier today, giving us some sense of what was happening as close as you could get to the scene. And I'm also joined now by ABC's George Stephanopoulos, who's been downtown all today. And so we'll have a chance to revisit that scene from a variety of locations after we hear from the president, because it's 8:30 Eastern Time, 3:30 in the West.